Hello, everybody. It's Douglas here, coming to you from Cape Town. This is actually our take two because we started and having a bad line. So today we're talking to Spud and Susan in Colombia. Hello, guys.
Hola.
So what
How
we
are you?
were previously talking about was a busy day in your gym. So just first tell us a little bit about your gym and then what you were doing in your gym this weekend.
Well, our gym is about 10,000 square feet, and we have equipment for every type of person: powerlifting, strongman, bodybuilding, whatever you're into, got it. So this weekend we had our third annual holiday bash powerlifting meet, and basically, as she was saying earlier, powerlifting is composed of three lifts: the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and you have 3 attempts on each one. And you have to get at least one of the squat, bench, and the deadlift to move on to get a total. Gotcha. So the guys with the biggest totals, they win their weight classes, and sort of like a regular weightlifting as well. So we had 50 participants in it, and we were here till 9 o'clock.
Fantastic. And
we had a guy squat 1,000. We had a guy squat 1,000 for the first time. So that was exciting.
Wow.
It was his first time squatting 1,000, many people have done it, but it was his first time.
Yeah.
And that's fun to see because that's a big milestone.
He's a big stat guy. So the first thing he said was, that's going to push me up in the rankings. I won't be considered your all total, blah, blah. I was like, all right. Sounds good, dude.
Yeah, but I suppose very quickly you find out what it is someone's motivation. It's some people, the 1,000 pounds for them, it's in their mind that they want to achieve it. In his mind, all he's looking at is where does that put me in the rankings and compare me to other people. And it's not right and it's not wrong, but I think from a coaching perspective or a therapy perspective, if you don't realize that those two motivations are completely different, they've got different languages that go with them and different ways of interacting with your athlete, your power lifter, or your client.
And so what's cool about that statement is you could take that about this kid and say it was just about statistics, but then if you peel that layer away, it's really about how much respect he has for Marc and the thought that if he can hit Marc's numbers or surpass them, then he's done for one of his throws. So it seems like a negative at first, but then as you unwrap, it actually
but I don't think it's ever a negative. It's so we don't want it to be a negative. What it is it's an interpretation of what people want. But I like that there's a layer beneath it, and probably as you go deeper and deeper, you find out that there's even more. And all you've ever got to do is you've got to meet the people that you're training and working with, wherever that is. And the deeper you can get in there, what drives them and their motivation, the more chance there is they're going to successfully go and achieve what they're setting out to achieve with your help and guidance, which is cool.
It is cool content that gets made on the table, I think. And I think it's also cool when you know someone's history or you know enough about it, that as you're working, you can pull out things for them to think about their own self that maybe they hadn't made correlations to.
Well, I think particularly when you're working in like with powerlifters, understanding like you guys will see it over and over that people hit a certain barrier that they struggle to get beyond. And if you watch someone do it 2, 3, 4 times, you start to notice a certain pattern of behavior that they bring when they're trying to break through a threshold that they maybe don't. Let's say it's 800 pounds is my goal, and at 750 I do this, but as it goes above 750, the stress changes, or and so you actually start to see that what I do is different. And if you hadn't noticed, then you couldn't help almost feed it back to me and say, hey, Doug, have you noticed that 750 is easy for you? You're styling on that. But dude, when you're aiming for the 800, there's this, you go different and you're actually getting in your own way. And what are we going to do about it? So as you say, that's the thing. When you know a bit of the history, when you can, and when you bring like your experience and your skill set on what you can observe, and obviously both of you are serious in the world of powerlifting, and you know I think what would be quite an interesting conversation to go into was you guys obviously have done quite a few 4 days with me over the years, haven't you? And
3 of them.
Three of them. So that's 12 days with Doug. Wow. There should be a medal for that.
I was waiting for my medal. I never got it.
It's in the African Post. You may wait a while. Especially,
shit, I'll never get that, will I?
Because what was so interesting is, Susan, when we look at you and your powerlifting, your lifting weights, what pattern were you? Do you remember?
I was a 0.
You were
Yes,
a 0.
I was a 0.
So like for somebody watching this, they should go, how can you be a 0 and lift big weights? Oh, she must only lift little dinky things.
At the time, I was a 0. I was 3 weeks out from a competition where I ended up squatting 402, benching 185, which isn't great, and deadlifting 416. But I was a 0, which was hard for my brain.
Yeah, and so what's so beautiful about that is when you understand that, and you know, it's like once I knew that, I could start asking more probing questions about how you were being coached. And you said, yeah, you have this crazy coach. And then you looked over at Marc next to you. And this quiet soul.
I'm not crazy.
And there's this quiet soul who, when you're about to do a lift, going at, yeah, that's it. That's the one. Goes absolutely batshit crazy. Why? Because if he doesn't do that, even in training, you can't do the lift. Because and the interesting part in that is, as a 0, you needed a stimulus that created an adrenaline rush that allowed you to survive the big scary dragon and lift the weight. And the interesting part that I remember was saying, so what happens in competition if Spud's got all in your face and got you worked up, and then there's a disruption? Because I think you guys told me that if you've started your routine and let's say the judges aren't ready, or someone says, just hang on a minute, your coach isn't allowed back into the space. So you've just got to go do that lift. And suddenly you go, geez, this thing that I know I can pick up, I can't even budge it a little tiny bit. And then you start to realize that you're not the only one out there that you guys have seen over all these years. And so we have a strategy that each pattern has a strategy, but a 0 requires adrenaline in order to get the job done. And, you know, powerlifting is a perfect place for a 0 to reside, as long as you have a Spud in your corner, because it's a short burst, which is your 10 seconds of adrenaline. Because the minute you hit that 10 seconds, the adrenaline starts to drop off. And unless the stimulus comes back and blasts in your face again, you're going to go from 0 to 0 in a friggin' instant. And, you know, I don't know where Spud was at when you became world famous in your incident, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it is that watching someone who's successfully lifted a weight and they kind of, you see them start to wobble, and suddenly it's like the weight that was possible suddenly became impossible. And they either fall backwards, fall forwards, or if they're unlucky, the body just starts to like implode as though there's a demolition going on. And we start to go, oh, the body must have just fatigued. And the answer is no, it just lost its strategy to be able to hold that weight, because in this case, the adrenaline just switched off. That's kind of crazy.
And you get it is crazy. I have some stories where I've been distracted in that moment and missed a lift. One of the funniest is I was doing a bench press and the head judge, they're behind you, and he leaned in right as I took the weight and said something like, "Okay, girl, show me what you got." Like he was trying to be really positive, but that verbal cue knocked everything else out of my brain, and the weight came down and I had nothing, right? So he just disrupted the pattern I had.
Yeah, had you jumped up, like head-butted him and gone, "Yo, mother trucker, get out my friggin' face," jump back down, you would have gone, boom, boom, watch this. But you didn't, because you're a peaceful soul.
Well, they would have DQ'd her if she'd done that.
Yeah,
she would have been disqualified.
But it would have been
don't like it.
In my book, it would be worth it.
It would have been funny. It would have been funny. That's for sure.
No. Sometimes you have to be willing to sacrifice to prove a point. That would be good sacrifice.
That would have been a good sacrifice, because I would have liked that lift.
Yeah. So my question is, knowing that you were a zero when we first started, I can't even remember, was that 2017? How?
16.
Yeah. So
yeah, it was just post the cancer.
Sorry, Spud, I missed that.
And that was just post the cancer. I just got out of recovery, basically.
Okay, so that's a big time in both of your lives where all the energy was on you healing, you surviving, and that's pretty overwhelming.
Well, if you remember, JL was supposed to have a clinic in June, and I wasn't able to attend because the radiation, I just hadn't recovered to a point where it was good. So that's when he told us about, you being on the event, and we went to Swiss, and then the next week we came to you. So that's sort of like the timeline.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think this is what people don't get. It's like your ability to lift a big weight isn't just how hard I've trained and what's happening in that moment. It's everything that's going on in your world around that. And sometimes the thing that distracts us and the thing that undermines us or puts us at risk is so arbitrary and so, or seemingly arbitrary, but it's not. Or you go, okay, so here's us looking at Spud's recovery and all this energy and effort that goes into that. And then it's hard to find the energy to do the lift. So the system, because a zero, for anyone who doesn't understand the work, a zero is a place of overwhelm. So we see chronic fatigue, exhaustion fatigue, post-traumatic stress, low motor tone kids, all of those things fall into these categories. And it's when the body doesn't find an effective strategy to do hip flexion and therefore create effective movement. So you can never, ever be a center out driver. And when the body has gone seeking other strategies, it fails and it doesn't find an effective way. So it ends up being adrenaline is the way through. I just want to, I know before we started this, I said I'm going to share some news. I'm right now overly friggin' impressed with myself, just so you know. It's first time ever. But yesterday when I went surfing, okay, so now let's take the story back. There is a place called Scarborough. Scarborough is the place that broke my surfboard, wherever it was, 6 months ago, that ended up on social media. Right. Yesterday, I was surfing a different part of Scarborough, and the first time I surfed Scarborough was 28 years ago. And the car park section, 28 years ago, I was told, be careful when you surf there. There is a hidden rock, an invisible rock. And I've surfed there for 28 years. And not like enough times, and I've never seen the rock, and I've never confronted the rock, and I've certainly never bumped into the rock. Yesterday, I met the rock very unexpectedly because I was in deep water, and I actually hit my head, and I've been Yeah, last night I was just like staring blankly out into space. When I got Matt to test me and see what my body was doing, like my lower part was all doing good, but my head, literally baby finger, would go flying backwards. That's high risk for anyone. You know, and so like today's been a busy day, and I was thinking, wow, I'm going to be like a zombie. So I stopped about 15 minutes before setting up to do this with you guys. And I just went through each part of the level 1 basic sequence. And I found just under the zygomatic arch into the masseters and just above it, but particularly on the left because the drive came here, that I got my head control back. And I actually feel like my brain is just has turned back on, and I only know it because I can actually so it's quite exciting actually. Because I even, you know Eric and Joanne Janota. I was chatting on message to Eric now, and I was going, oh, I'm talking to you guys, and this is going to be interesting because I've got a mild concussion, and I haven't quite hacked it yet. Actually, I just didn't take enough time this morning because I had a lot of stuff to do, and I hacked it about 15 minutes before we started, and I feel freaking great. So, by the way, I just thought I'd share that. Because I actually thought that this was going to be one of those interviews where I did say to you earlier, if I'm like staring off into space, just know I've got a story for you. Doug found the invisible rock.
So how'd you find it?
Well,
what happened in the surf to make you find it?
Well, I was doing a turn, and as I completed the turn, the backwash hit. So it threw me off almost like doing a backflip, but down the wave. And I would have said the water was about, let's put it in like about 8 feet deep, but whatever I hit was about 2 feet underwater. And, and so all you do, because it's a good surfer thing, first you check for blood, because if there's blood, get out the water. It's a logical thing to do. There was no blood, so I looked around and I kind of went, hang on, I'm almost in the middle of the ocean. There are no rocks here, because the rocks, there are rocks in the front, and you have to be careful because the wave swirls you into those, like the way the water was moving. But I think it's just the way the sand gets, like as the ocean moves, the sand moves as well. So somehow it had shifted and exposed the thing. But it was so weird because the only time I'd ever been told about it was 28 years ago, the very time I surfed, the very first time I surfed there. But yesterday was the day that I found it. But what I'd also said to Eric in the message was I feel lucky because I have a little routine I do before I go surfing. And it's just about checking in with myself and making sure I'm all there. And I've had a tired 2 weeks. I've found this whole world is a bit fatiguing. And I was chatting to Jeff on Saturday afternoon, and we were chatting about that. So that'll be the interview that goes before this one. And just saying, the last 2 weeks I felt tired. So I was very aware I needed to very much check in with myself, because I reckon if I just brought tired Doug into that situation, that's when surfers come floating up and they're unconscious. And because nobody was surfing with me in that section, nobody would have seen. And that's an unfortunate part of what's happening in the world, like in the world of surf. And Dougal and I, the big wave surfer, we were discussing that because he could see it in his domain of the really big waves. But you know what? When there are invisible rocks that pop up, it doesn't matter how big it is. The wave was maybe 2.5 meters. It's not a big wave by anyone's standard, but big enough. And but when you hit your head, so I'm actually, I'm kind of excited that I've got this much energy. Because I must tell you, earlier today when I started my computer, it was a bit blurry.
I feel like this is a metaphor that you'll be able to use in classes going forward. The metaphor of the invisible rock. Right. So for 28 years, it wasn't there. And then one day out of the blue, it is there.
Yeah.
Like,
no, but
we all have our invisible rocks.
But being me, when I got out and kind of, you know, I obviously have to let Amy know I'm driving home. I'm not quite all there. And so my voice message said, I have two ways of sharing this with you. The first one goes like this. You know, there's George in the jungle, watch out for the tree. And here it was Doug of the ocean, watch out for the rock. It's just what came up. And then the other one was slightly Afrikaans, but I'm sure you'll understand what the meaning is. But fok, kyk uit vir die rock, which basically means watch out for the rock, and something that sounds a lot like something else in English. It's the stuff that you either that you don't know, or you know, but you chose to forget it, you know, and you eventually, you know, it's kind of like the lion tamer that for 10 years is in the circus has taken care of this lion and sticks his head in the lion's mouth and you know, takes it for granted. And then one day the lion just closes his mouth and eats the guy's head. And it was like, oh no, you're just not quite there. You weren't as alert. You weren't as aware of your environment as you thought.
So tell me this, every time you surf there, before you get in the water, does the story of the invisible rock come to your brain? Or did you hear that 28 years ago and put it away and not think about it?
I think I'd reached the point where I didn't believe the rock was there, because I'd surfed there so many times and the rock had never appeared. And it's not even like anyone else had mentioned it, spoken about hitting it. You know, like there's a place up the coast called near Jeffreys Bay, the very famous wave, but further down there's a place called Seal Point. Beautiful wave. But in the middle of the wave, there's a big rock. Now you can't not see the rock, and it's got a name, and the name is Full Stop, funnily enough. And you know it's there, and you either go up and around it, or you go round it, or you don't, and you get it wrong and you go into it. You know, and so those are things that are clear and visible. It's visible, and it's something that you create a strategy around, because you know it's there, because you don't want to pull off the wave, because that would be kind of silly, because it's still a great wave after that. So you have to make a choice, and you also, if you don't make a choice, it makes a choice for you. You're on the rock. It's just one of those.
So while you're talking, I'm just thinking about the invisible rock and sort of that idea.
Yeah.
And working with clients, especially people that kind of know what we do, but don't really understand the depth of the work.
Yeah.
And you're serving them up invisible rocks all the time. And when we make them things, because they haven't felt it, or they haven't fully bought in, it all seems pretty visible. Like that's the magic and the voodoo part of it. I don't know if that's making sense. I was working with somebody recently who I know has trauma from childhood, been in the military for 20 years, and then post-military. Like, I know there's a lot of trash out, and he's pretty locked down. And you start to make those correlations with them. But even though they know they have trauma, they know they were in the military, right? It's still it's an invisible rock. They know it's there, but they haven't figured out how it has manifested in their body
for sure. But I think this is always the interesting conversation on when we start with a client. You know, even if we know a lot about them, we also have to check in with what is it that they want out of the session. And sometimes you get to that point and it's an easy thing, and you just, you know, you do a few tests, you show them the pattern, they go, oh, wow, that's cool. You do some points, the body changes. And then they go, wow, this is amazing. I'm always waiting for them. If they know there's trauma, but they can't see how it connects, I'm waiting for him to come back and go, wow, I was really good for 5 days. And then I just seem to shut down and go back to how I started. Then you go, well, what happened after 5 days? And suddenly you have an in, because they'll go, well, nothing shut you down. And if you're military, that really is going to piss you off. So you're going to find a reason. And so you'll realize, you're helping them go, actually, I know what it was. I was going to the mall. See, I'm even using the word mall, aren't I? I parked at the mall. I was walking out from my car, and a car actually backfired. And it was actually right then. Oh, right. So why do you think a backfiring car impacted on you? Well, actually, I've got, in my history, there was a ambush, blah, blah. And it just took me back there. Wow. And it was after that you noticed your body shut down? Yeah, that's interesting. I said, well, then we probably have to do some work on that. I'm getting goosebumps saying that, actually, because, but it's kind of, if they can figure out that moment where they shut down, it's quite easy to track back and say, well, what happened in the 5 minutes or the 2 minutes before that? Because so it's not, it doesn't have to be as complicated as we like to make it, because it's often we think we must do the whole story, and I know that a lot of people struggle with that because they think that's what I'm doing, and I'm not. I'm taking one piece of information and I'm extracting from there, and seeing if we can find a place where we can, it's that hack point. The hack point idea of a hack point is to find a place that we can get in to find more. And it doesn't mean we get all the way in one go, because that generally would be overwhelming. And that's when suddenly he might be on the table going, oh my God, we were ambushed. This is what happened, da, 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 da. And then you have to go, dude, are you safe? If you are, awesome, we continue. If you're not, can I do something to make you safe, which is the glute stuff? And if you're not, and it's managing that. And so we've spent our entire lives setting up these defenses and strategies of survival, and then we stand guard at the door so that nobody's going to find it, and we're going to deny it blatantly, because the correct word in a good, it's another Afrikaans word, is paraat. Paraat is like this upright, so you almost untouchable, but we're all touchable, we're all vulnerable. And when we go, I want this sorted, but don't go there, well, that's where all the work is, that place you don't want to go. But also they can only go there when they're ready. So you pull at little threads, and then when it unravels, they'll almost go, yeah, I knew it was that, obviously.
This particular individual told me the last time I worked on him that he shot 50,000 volts, and that did not compare to what I could do with my thumb.
Bravo.
Yeah, I was pretty proud.
Very nice. Now you see, that kind of thing, that excites me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm a light touch.
So am I.
No, you're not.
I just have good sequence in what I do. So
There is.
Sequence is everything. That's why I'm laughing and chuckling while I'm doing it. Yeah, the fact that you pull those faces, Spud, that's just fun. So Spud,
I think it's more fun for you right now.
It's always fun for me. I'm on a mailing list with about 100 docs and trainers, and from the US, actually. I think I'm definitely the only one. Well, there are a couple of people from outside of the US, but there was just a comment about, I can't remember the name they were talking about, but a gentleman on his podcast had specifically said, if we know that kids are having almost mental breakdown, mental fatigue because of the inability to play and interact socially, because that, yeah, that's fine. And he said, why do you think that rule only applies for kids? You know, so I think for me, and this was in the conversation I had with Jeff, like I'm missing the workshops because one, it's social interaction, but two, it's complete play. It's fun. It's, you know, and so that's why I laugh and have so much joy when my thumb or my pinky is doing its work, because it's fun.
For who?
Still comes back to you.
But isn't that what I teach you guys? It always has to come back to you. Mm-hmm. If you're not having fun, what's the friggin' point?
That's true.
Most people don't come back when I get them.
But that's what happens when they leave in a coffin.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but you'll probably find that they do go out and break, you know, like suddenly a big lift is not nearly as scary as Spud in his thumb. You know, because
they would all rather lift 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. So what it does is it changes your interpretation of an event. So the reason why we can't do a lot of things is because we perceive that our inability, our fear is greater than our desire. But if your fear of Spud is far greater than a lift, I'll choose the lift, please. So therefore, you know, it's I'm good with strategies like that, and I've used that on my rugby players, and I've used it on my fighters, and it's kind of like, especially when we get into jaw points and things like that, and when they go, oh my God, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever experienced. I go, really? The worst thing ever, ever, ever. Worst thing ever, ever, ever. I go, awesome. So if I see you shut down because of fear on the field again, I'm coming after you. And they're like, oh, geez, my worst tackle that I've ever had on me suddenly pales into insignificance based upon what that felt like. Okay, so your database of pain and therefore your line of fear has shifted completely. So imagine that this over here is where, like, this will be my start point. And I come along here, and anything beyond my hand, this is all scary. Doot, 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 doot. And then you guys somehow get me into your gym, put me on a table, hit some points that take me to here. You know what? The next time I walk to this point, it's lost its power, because this is the scariest point. So what happens when we're growing our database of experience in both directions? If we can go that deep into pain and discomfort, we can go that far into pleasure too. And too many people want to live in the safe little places. Oh, I don't want any pain. Okay, you can only have this much pleasure. And then you are bored and disconnected, and, you know, just, but you actually have to go this way. So sometimes people can go the other way. You know, it's because they can have that much pleasure, they end up having that much pain afterwards. And where I see this the most is with the athletes that achieve their goals. And maybe even your 1,000-pound lifter. If my goal has been to get there because of this, there's a joy, there's a celebration, there's an amazingness that goes with it. And often there's an emptiness that follows straight after. And they always say, in the Olympics, watch the gold medalist. Watch to see at which point the joy goes, because they've got what they've spent their life pursuing, and they get to it. And somewhere in their system, it goes, okay, I've got that. Now what? Poof, and down you go all the way to the other edge. You know, that's why, frig, maybe I did hit my head quite hard. What's that amazing sprinter from Jamaica?
Usain Bolt?
Usain Bolt. Wow, geez, sorry, Usain. My bad. But that's what made him so amazing. When he arrived, before he'd broken any world records, he didn't come to say, I'm going to be the fastest man in the world. He said, I am going to be a legend. So freaking clever. I'm going to be a legend. What it means is, when I break the world record once, that doesn't make me a legend. What's going to make me a legend is I've got a bigger, longer plan. I'm going to come back every year or every Olympics, and I'm going to dazzle you and hold your attention, and I'm going to get the bonus from Puma for another world record. Very cunning. To me, it's sheer brilliance, because what it means is, like, we all saw in that very first race when he first broke the world record, he slowed down. He realized he was running too fast, which would mean in his big master plan, it would be harder for him to break the record next time. So I'll slow down. So I'll just break the record and just get the celebration. But if my goal was just to get a gold medal, just to be the fast, just to have that world record, it was such a short, the shelf life is so short. But his brilliance, whether it be his or his coaches, or extended this out, and that's exactly what he is. He's made himself a legend because that was the goal of what he was doing. It's amazing. And all of that.
So is your language different? Is your language different if when you are working with someone that's doing the reverse, that has the pleasure to pain instead of the pain to pleasure?
For sure. I think I think that my language actually is always different. Depends who you are, because my goal is to figure out as much as I can about what your language is. Because if I use too much of mine, you spend too much time trying to interpret what I'm saying. If I can figure out your language, and that's why, you know, how many serious professionals, when they come on the workshops, like, what do you mean a Teletubby point and Peter Pan points? And well, the reason is it's literally dumbed down so that the real brilliance behind it can be accessed. Because if you make it complex, then you're losing people. And then instead of getting them to do 3 things, you might, if you're lucky, get them to do 1. Because what our brains do, the minute something confronts us that makes us, that we don't understand, we immediately go, whoa, I don't want to look stupid, so I'm just going to push it away. And so I've lost my connection with my client. So if we can keep it, if we can start with simplicity, and if our client wants more complexity, cool, have complexity, it's easy. But how to keep it simple so that you, and then you put it into their language. And I think like golf is a great example. I don't play golf. I enjoy the movement of golf, but I went and studied with Robert in Germany, and we spent a week together, and he taught me everything about what he was putting into golf and kind of what his thinking was. And then I translated that into my thinking. Like I put the two together, but in golf language. And so that when we sit with golfers, we talk golf. And what was amazing, I then ran 2 programs with the PGA and with golf pros 2 days. And right at the start, I was very clear. I said, I am not a golfer. Please don't ask me to come and play golf with you. Both workshops, at least, like out of groups of like 30 and 30, at least 10 of those golf pros from each workshop, at some point in those workshops, to come, Doug, you seem to be so passionate about golf and you seem to know so well. Would you like to play around with me sometime? I'm like, you obviously weren't listening. I don't play golf. But all it was a reflection that I'd worked really hard to understand their language, almost to honor them, respect them enough to hear them in the way in their world, because otherwise they have to constantly be changing what I'm saying to fit them. And most of the time they're going to then misinterpret it and go, no, but this is what you said. No, that's not what I said. But if I can put it into their world, whatever their world is. And I also realized that, like, because I enjoy learning things, sometimes you can't always go deeper into something. So like my world of activation, I've done as many things that can take me deeper down the hole. But what I've found is the learning becomes more interesting when I expand it. When I go, okay, so how do we take activation and put it through this lens? And let's say this lens is golf, or this lens is somebody lifting a really big weight, whether it be a squat or whether it be a bench press or whatever it being. And how do I change what I know into that language that it makes sense without a big stretch between? But that's what you guys are going to help me with anyway.
Yay.
Yay. Well, you do remember that when we did the program in Columbus, so we sat around with JL and Jeff and you guys and me, and basically we were talking about 1,000 pound, what was it, 1,000 pound squat with belly breathing, and the possibility, not saying it should be done. Again, disclaimer here, don't go out and try this. It's a conversation piece. It's checking to see if the philosophy of what we're teaching actually is 100% of the time true. But it does mean we have to, there are a whole lot of parameters to put into it. But wasn't it amazing where after that dinner, and we thought about, we sat, and yes, there were drinks. So obviously the further the night went on, the more we yeah, let's do this. And then in the morning, take it to the group. I don't know how many people on that workshop, maybe 30. And probably about 6 of the guys are, yeah, I want to be in. What? Here we think we're throwing out a ridiculous idea that who wants to try that? And here these big guys who they go, that makes sense. I want to be first. That was cool. And I reckon,
do it.
Yeah, but I reckon, well, we would have done it if it weren't for COVID. Let's be honest. It was an intriguing idea, but you see, what's so fascinating for me is they had to buy into the philosophy of what I was bringing and the methodology of what I was bringing. But they also then had to trust that if you guys and JL, who are experts in that area, also think it's not a bad idea, that must, it's the immersing of two ideas into one. But if I stood up in the world and I said, I think Douglas Heel, surfer, that you should be able to squat 1,000 pounds while belly breathing, everyone has the right to say, dude, you really should just sit down and shut up unless you're going to go do it yourself. But just like golf, I don't lift weights. I know it's surprising. I know people are surprised often. I don't lift weights. It's, and so therefore on that level, I have no credibility. So therefore collaboration and partnerships and discovering new things come like that. Knowing it may also not work. Yeah, sorry, Susan.
You've been testing the theory a little, or a lot.
Or a lot, and it's quite interesting. But just like we were talking, I was mentioning earlier about let's say I can do 750, but going to 800, I start to change my behavior. That's where the work happens. And so you'll see that, hey, you can get to a certain threshold, and then some part of your brain goes, and in that moment, you have to stop, take a step back, reset yourself, get yourself ready, get all of those components, because it's going to a place that's new, that's not, and I hate the 4-minute mile because I love it, but I hate it, but it's always brought up. But it is one of those.
Sure.
So, well, there's so much
sorry, I lost you there for that moment.
There's so much mental stuff in lifting anyway, that places like that make our lifters sort of stop and have freakouts. That I think just teaching that in general, right? So you can reset in the middle of a training session. You don't just have to reset at the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
At any time during your training, if you hit a threshold, you can bring yourself down or bring your body down. Push forward.
But I think that's quite a nice terminology, actually. Bring your body down so that your performance goes up. That's a good t-shirt. Far better than that other one. That one actually could go into mass distribution. But we won't go there. So Spud, your famous YouTube moment was under a big weight.
Yeah.
Where both shoulder and knee blew out quite explosively.
Shoulder first.
So shoulder first.
So once it was 12:05. It was the squat, and I picked it up and I stepped down like my rear delt tore off, but everything seemed okay, and I really just wanted to put the 12:05 in the books, be done with it. So the farther down I got, then I'd had a partial quad tear when going into this, and it started pulling apart. So once the shoulder let loose, and then I got the hole, then the quad let loose too, and tore off, being the infamous video, which is shown regular speed, and then for some reason shown at half speed.
Google Marc Bartley 12:05 squat dunk, and you'll find it on YouTube.
Turn the volume down.
Well, I don't know. I reckon, especially if we're going to watch this, have this on YouTube, maybe we'll just have the link underneath for those people who just want to.
Let's put the warning. Put the warning on it that says no volume. Turn the volume down.
Turn the volume.
Turn it up.
But so my question is, based upon what you know now, why did that happen? Because the answer is not, I had a big weight that I was lifting. That's not the answer. That's what everybody, that would be the standard answer. And it's kind of like, that's boring. What do you think was going on that you knew you could lift that weight? And you did lift the weight, actually. But why did your body break down at that specific moment? What was going on? That if someone
well,
because it's always about taking insights from when things work, but more importantly when things don't. Like, why does that happen? You know, did you have any? Have you,
so,
especially with what we've been doing?
I'm sorry, say it again.
So especially with like the be activated process and the thinking, did that give you any different insights looking back and going, crap, this is what was going on, or not? Because I don't know. That's why we're chatting, because I don't know.
Well, if you want the short answer, then we talk about arm drivers and jaw drivers and those things. Obviously, I felt like I was an arm driver. That was part of my thing, and a jaw driver at the same time. And as soon as the rear delt gave out, it because I went the whole cycle training very well. The quad was partially torn from a bench press. So I drive so hard on my legs that I actually partially, sort of tore it up a little bit. But the whole cycle, the squat went really well. It was just perfect. And all I really want to do is put that 12:05 in the books, right? So reflecting upon it, I felt like once the shoulder gave out and the arm could not control the situation anymore, it quad alone. So the quad was by itself. And at the hole, that's when it all unraveled and gave loose. And going into the meet, I shouldn't have went because I had every sign saying don't go. But anyway.
Well, it is one of those interesting things. No, like that. Welcome to life. It's like there are many people that when the signs come up and say you shouldn't do this, they stop and they go, okay, sure. But the problem is, the more times you listen to that thing that says don't, then that becomes your default. You're always finding the things that say you shouldn't do this. But on the other side, if your instinct is to always do things, then you almost, that becomes your default, and you can hear it, but you push through. And I suppose the place that we're looking for, because I know I'm still looking for it, is the place where you have all the things coming up, and it's like, if 3 signs tell you not to do something, that's not enough. But if there are 5, maybe 10, that's a damn good reason maybe to take a step back. And I've got to say that probably in the last 5 years, there have been days where I've sat watching waves, and enough of those triggers are in me that just go, nope, not today. And often when I leave, I can feel how harshly I judge myself. You know, it's like that. Like all of those things that your friends and colleagues would do, you know, insulting you for not achieving something. Yeah, I have that beautiful internal dialogue when I'm trusting something that's strong enough. But it's a friggin' hard thing to tap into. And sometimes when our eye is on the goal so strongly, we stop listening to those little indicators.
Sure.
So it's kind of, especially in the like the world of powerlifting, where, you know, it's not actually that comfortable to lift the big weights, is it? You know, if it was like, oh wow, this is like smelling roses, you know, very difficult. That's almost not what you do it for. You do it for that intensity.
Well, it's always definitely crossing over a line. That's part of what I think makes this particular sport awesome is the it's a mountaintop. Once you cross the line, you know, then the next line comes up. Obviously, you're not quite to the top yet. You got to go to the next one, and next one, and next one. There's always a magic mountain that reappears that's higher every time that you hit a goal. But
invisible rocks and magic mountains. Goodness, this could be a psychedelic.
Well, however you want to frame it. I mean, that's it.
I like
climbing
it.
Everest.
Magic mountain is
make the top. No, there's more. There's more, but always crossing that line. I mean, I think that's what that changed my mental outlook on a lot of things. Like what I did just totally made everything else easier.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I suppose
business, whatever it was.
What I'm hearing and interpreting is it's funny. The first thing that came up was like, that's why I liked maths. Maths, because you do a sum, you check, and you get a tick. Oh, okay. So then you feel you can go on to the next thing. Now, you know, and it kind of, so I found that almost small reinforcements rather good. But I think that's why it's so important to have measurables when we're working with people, so they can actually have those achievements and recognizing what they can do now, that, you know, that a barrier is out the way. And whether it be just us doing a test or a flexibility or putting it into a movement or, you know, lifting a weight, and all of those things are expanding our perception of what we can do. So that makes so much sense, that your chosen tool was how much weight you could lift. And each time you lifted a weight, you pretty much expanded your belief on what was possible for you to be able to do, but in other areas too. Yeah, because the thing about when we're unraveling stories is, and people often go, but how can you know that information? And I say that you can ask someone anything about one area, and the way they describe that, what they do in when they play tiddlywinks, let's say, you know, when last did you play tiddlywinks? I don't know, but let's say it's tiddlywinks. The way you describe it and the way you do it, what happens here happens everywhere. So it's like the pattern is always there. So that's awesome. The reverse engineering of that is, if I can go and take an area of my life and be incredibly successful in that, that success will then overflow into all areas of my life. Why? Because what I do here exists everywhere. If I back out here over and over and over, I will find that I too will be backing out everywhere. If I'm overcoming something here, I'm thinking of Tony Robbins talks about every day for however many years. He gets up in the morning and he jumps into an ice cold plunger that he's got in all his different places. And basically he says there's not a single day in his entire life that he's enjoyed the thought of jumping in there, but he does it to train his mind to say, I'm the boss, not you. And I like that idea. Me, I'm slightly different. Very soon after getting used to the cold water, I enjoy it. So I want to enjoy the experience. I don't want to fight with it. I want my mind to go, good choice. Should we go colder next time?
Well, I think that's going back to what we're talking about here. You know, when I reached 1,000, when you get to higher levels, the puzzle's always changing. So you have to, I mean, you might, I squatted 1,000, but I had a friend that said, hey, dude, you did that so easy. You could do 1,100. So my mind already jumped to the 1,100. And that was probably a year and a half away, right? But then there's a puzzle, and that's where I also about the thing about powerlifting is it's a puzzle. As the higher you go, you have to go, well, I did that for so long. I did this for so long. How am I gonna simulate what I need to do in each training session and to get to that level? So each one is just a different puzzle to put together in another magic mountain that reappears right after that. So that's just something I just kind of want to throw in there.
No, I think that's awesome because it really is. It's the puzzle is the problem solving. It's kind of okay, and I think the big part that I heard there, which is what I see happens often in therapy sessions, but happens, I'm not going to say names, but someone I worked with recently gave feedback, and what we had done with this person was over and beyond what we set out to do. But they were talking about something that hadn't happened that was like a million miles beyond that. It was quite something, just reflecting back, and they're like, oh geez, I forgot. It's like if your goal is to lift 1,000 and you do it, but as you finish it, your mind already shifts to the next goal. What's interesting about that in my mind is you never get to truly take ownership of the success that you just achieved, because it's like we've just shifted the goalpost. Hey, that's good, but what's next? And so the one thing that helps puzzle solving is understanding, which is what made it successful. Because otherwise it's kind of like I remember when I first started like classic physio, when you've been given a whole lot of tools and no real idea on what's going on. So you do 5 things and your client comes back and they go, hey, whatever you did last time, I feel great. And you go, awesome. I guess I'm going to have to do the 5 things because I don't know what worked, because I was never taught to put measurable before intervention after. So I didn't know what was working. So I had to do all 5 things. And often they'd come back and go, no, not quite so good this time. Oh shit. And so the thing is about when we're successful and we can figure out what it is that was that thing that made it successful, there's our foundation to build the next thing on. But when we rush to the next one, it's amazing how the thing that made you successful, like one of my fighters, when I went to go work with him years ago, I was going to teach him a strike technique, but when I was analyzing some of his fights, 2 of his fights ended almost by mistake, where he knocked the guy out. He was like ready to wind up this huge right hand, and he did a jab the wrong way, but the way we would teach, and the guy suddenly was gone, and you could actually see his confusion, because I'm about to really hurt you and you just dropped. But because he didn't stop to go, what was that? When I showed him the videos, he's like, no, that's not why. That can't be why. I said, well, now we're going to play a game if Doug gets to hit you. So let me show you. And which of course, what a privilege. You don't have to pay me. I just want to hit you. It's even more fun than my thumb, actually. But it's like, so when, and this is for all of us, is like when we don't recognize what was the magic recipe that created the success. When you go to the next magic mountain, you have to pull all the extra gear along that you probably don't need anymore, because you never stop to say, hey, what was useful, what wasn't. It's quite fascinating. I like this that was cool. So we've got Magic Mountains, and yeah, I like it.
I think that's an interesting point you just made about powerlifting, because I've obviously seen him throughout his career. But most powerlifters, that's the exact thing. They get total, they go out for steak dinner tonight, and then wake up the next morning ready to train for the next cycle to hit the next goal. We were at a meet a couple of years ago when a friend of ours had expectations of what he was going to do, and something happened in the squat and he didn't get what he wanted, and we were talking and he was really bummed out. And in that moment, that sort of thought hit me, and I looked at him and I just said, but like, it's okay, like, you're still the same person, we still love you, like, who you are is not tied up in whether or not you got this one squat. So you were a perfectly lovely human before you attempted it, and you were the same perfectly sort of lovely human. And I think we don't give ourselves enough grace to just sort of be in each moment and be okay with whatever happens before we take the next step. Powerlifters are particularly bad about it, but I'm sure every sport.
No,
well.
I think far beyond sports. I think almost there's a huge part of our upbringing that, you know, it's that love is conditional. As long as you're doing good, whatever good is, and whoever it is you're trying to impress, as long as you keep showing that you're succeeding, you will be loved. And if you don't, if you fail, then you're unlovable. And to hear, you know, when you say that, you go, yeah, but come on. No, unfortunately, if that's the belief system that drives your body, you know, your world, that's the thing that's driving your physiology, your body, and so it kind of becomes like the carrot to the donkey, or the red flag to the bull. It's like, that's what I'm going for, and you don't see anything else. And so I would love to have been a fly on the wall when you were telling him that, you know, you were lovely before and you were lovely after, whether he was going, oh wow, Sue, thanks, that's awesome, or whether he looked at you like, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Because it all depends where they're at.
Well, he did look at me that way, but I did also get through to him, because we've talked a lot since then, because he's a friend of ours.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first instinct is to say, you know, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, you know, kind of go away.
You talking about Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then he turned around and squatted 1,300 this year.
Right. 3 years later, he's got the highest total squat ever in geared powerlifting.
And we hate it.
No, we love him.
You see, you loved him so much that he expanded into 1,300.
Yes.
Well, he found a way around a lot of obstacles as well. He broke his sacrum.
I think so.
He broke his sacrum. He did a little work with Gil. You know, they wrote a book together and some other stuff on his injury. So he came back from that to accomplish the 1,300 squat, and kind of put the exclamation point on his career.
So he found a way to keep his pelvis stable, which sounds like zone 1, while creating an immense pressure through his system, engaged, if it's the sacrum, the pelvic floor is involved. So what he did is he created a huge, beautiful, active foundation that expanded into the 1,300 pounds. Says Doug, the non-weightlifter powerlifter, but that's just what pops into my head.
No, exactly.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was a great squat, and just to come back from that, I mean, just to you know, work on your own puzzle like that and solve that problem,
awesome.
You know, and have a couple babies at the same time. Just it's a wonderful thing.
Now that alone should be a miracle. I've yet to hear of a Brian who's had a couple of babies. That's friggin' awesome.
Not him personally, but
you know, that's the part I would be talking about. Like, hey man,
it was his lovely wife, Rhea, that had the babies.
Yes.
Oh, okay. You know,
She did the hard work.
I'm just doing. She did the hard work. He felt obligated to
work.
lift the weight because he knew how hard his wife was working in the background. Good man. Actually, yeah.
He will tell you that all day long. She's amazing.
Agreed.
But also, how old are these little people? They're all like very young.
They turned twins, and they just turned 1 year old.
Okay, so
yes,
remember the other side of when we're doing things and we know what our why is, we know what inspires us. You know, years ago, years ago, 1991, I was working in Pembury, which is outside London, as a locum physio, and I had a client. This is long before I always spoke a lot. I always told stories, and that's been a forever thing. That's just what I was born with. That.
Really?
Yep. but in talking to my client, who was a journalist, we discovered how much trauma was in her background, and it was one of those where she shared quite a lot. And I was young. I was like, wow, that's a lot. And so I just said, so you know what, since you're a writer, how about you write something? And instead of writing, this is what happened to me, she wrote the most amazing story. And the name of the story was A Reason to Rise. And it blew me away. And really, a reason to rise is, what is your why? Is your why strong enough to overcome the struggles, the difficulties, the barriers that are put in your way, the invisible rocks that appear? And it's being so clear and so deep in your why that it sits in your heart that you can expand through the challenges that life is going to throw at us. And it was this amazing thing about, I think it was a squirrel. You see, but it was about being hidden in its little little house. I don't know what you'd call a squirrel house. Its little haven, and like every time it wanted to come out, some other animal would attack it, and it was all about the squirrel finding the courage to go out anyway, because it had learned to withdraw and stay withdrawn. And basically it was her metaphor for what her life had become. And then it was about, actually, I'm not going to accept this anymore. And I am going, I'm just going to find a different strategy. And I think, and I wish I had it. I actually think I know where it is. It's not even in this country, but the strategy, it was about finding a better strategy. So if every morning you go outside your house and you get attacked or bonked on the head or whatever, the question being, well, which is scarier, that attack, or you're also scared of the dark? Well, I'm less scared of the dark than getting bumped on the head, so I'll go out at night. And so it was all about finding a strategy to get out and overcome, because the reason to rise was big enough and strong enough. And it was a powerful, beautiful story. But it always, for me, was like, whenever I'm struggling, whenever I'm hitting up against stuff, I know that I've lost sight of my reason to push through. Because when that reason is there, that's when your mind and your body align to achieve what you want to achieve. But your why has to be strong enough, and it has to be lined up with a body that's capable of doing that too. And when the two come together, one can achieve anything. And I think sometimes the body's failing, but more often than not, the mindset fails first, because the body's giving the signal going, I can't do it anymore. But when your why is strong enough, crazy things happen. So here's a man lifting incredible weight, but he's got two little people that could only, well, he has chosen to let them inspire him, because it can be the other way around. You go, oh geez, what am I going to do now? Or you go, wow, this is incredible. I've got not one gift, but two. You know, you can imagine the two little
and his training
side of the bar.
His training cycle sort of started about the time they found out they were pregnant. So it is just amazing, amazing story, amazing ride, I think.
Nice. That's very cool. But you know, it is also, we are meaning making machines. So any event can happen, and you can make it the most dismal, horrible thing in your world, or you can make it something that inspires you. And so the meaning you give to any event is actually where the inspiration comes. And a lot of people, you know, you've seen it on workshops, when we find someone, when we look at this component, that they actually have nothing. And that's not actually true. They've just interpreted everything as a burden, as heaviness and difficult. And then it's very difficult to achieve and push through the difficult times, you know, and difficulty requires us to have a reason to go there and to be in those difficult places, and to, yeah, and and so often we'll send them home. Well, often we send them home. Think about this, go find something. And everyone has something. Everyone has something, at least one thing. And it doesn't always stay the same. And I think that's what for me, I discovered as Matt grew, because I started teaching 2 weeks after Matt was born, because the minute I held him, that was my, oh geez, I actually need to stop indulging myself and just doing Doug's world as I feel like it. Because if I'm not doing what I'm meant to do, then I'm teaching him that that's okay. And it also meant that I had a whole lot of crap in my world that needed to get sorted. And otherwise I just passed it on to him. And what's interesting is watching as he grows, you know, he goes from this cute little bundle of joy to, you know, this, and there was a certain phase where as father and son, your relationship shifts, you know, but it's not worse or better, it shifts. And so therefore suddenly the little bundle of joy isn't the same kind of inspiration, it's different. And if you don't adjust and realize as time goes on, your various inspiration points do shift and change, you might suddenly find you're out on a limb thinking everything's cool. And when you reach out for your inspirations, they're all in different places, they're gone. So you almost have to do check-ins with yourself. How regularly? Because people always want to know, I have no friggin' idea. But you do have to check in, especially when you're about to do something that challenges you, that seems to be outside of your normal. You know, what is my why? Why am I doing this? But what is my driver? What are the things that expand me and inspire me, that will allow me, that when the 10-ton truck parks itself on me, what is the thing that's going to make me just give up and go, wow, I can't do anything about this? And what is the thing that's going to say, I'm just going to get up because I've got something more important to do? And all of that plays out in our physiology and how we bring ourselves to the world. It's quite fun.
Have you ever used that thought point in a seminar? It'd be interesting to start a 4 days or 2 days with that insight as something that you ask the group collective to sort of think about with themselves.
Well, I think we always
I'm almost thinking
after the hello session.
I'm almost thinking like it would be a fun creative writing and be sort of melding together. If that was your beginning, and then you through the activations, writing or art or whatever it is.
Oh, for sure. I think there's so many different ways, but I think you know, a group of professionals with paper and paint and crayons, I think that'll only get messy. Yeah. You know, I think a lot of them struggle enough with the fact that we have such an informal format in which we teach, because it's got to go with where the room goes. That when we start things like that, but for sure when we do the more advanced stuff and we separate and say, all right, so now you've got a few 4 days under your belt and you want to go into a different realm, because I think really there is, you know, there seems to be a growing collective of people that are getting hold of me saying more, ready, where we're going to go. And that's what I've always been waiting for, is when the collective is enough that it makes sense to take the journey deeper, because it's kind of, that's the thing that, when Tim for everyone, the social media and the guy we did the interview with, when Tim was like, okay, so Doug, I see that you've taught basically 3 levels, and how many levels are there? And I'm like, well, they're 97. And he's like, what? Yeah, 97. It's like
99 bottles of beer on the wall.
There we go. Yeah. I had a friend of mine share with me the most wonderful thing. Jack Black Brewery has this amazing bottle, the Growler, and it's 1.89 liters. And so the next day I went off to the brewery and got 2. What a joy. Not that you drink it all in one go ever. Oh, what's that twitch in my eye? Oh, but it was such
a bit of a liar there.
It just felt so joyful. So like, if there are 99 bottles of beer on the wall and they're big as a growler, my God, we're in trouble. But sounds like fun.
It'll be a long day.
Indeed.